borrow from my new favorite YouTuber, AVE. Gentlemen, welcome back to the show. In the saga of the YZ144, we are going to be disassembling, cleaning, and reassembling the cylinder. I've already run it through the ultrasonic once to kind of get the big pieces off. Now we're going to take it apart, take the power valve apart. I'll show you guys how that works and what it does for a two-stroke. We'll clean all that back up, put it all back in there, and we'll have this thing prepped and ready to go back on the bike when we get that done. We're waiting on some parts because I am getting a clutch for it, and transmission bearings because those didn't come with the bottom end kit. So anyway, let's get to it. Let's get this thing apart. All right, to start, we got Phillips head screws. That's silly, but it's okay because we have the equipment. Impact driver, screwdriver bit, the wrong size. Number 2, no, these aren't JIS, which is probably what these are, but this will work just fine. Mainly because these don't usually get all that tight. Oh, there we go. There is the power valve actuator. So, let's see. Don't have much light in there. Let's take a look here. So, let me back that up. So, this right here is the power valve actuator shaft, and then there's an actuator that actually comes up from the cases up here, hooks onto this, and it twists this thing as the RPMs go up. And what that does, get the water out of there, is it opens this. You can see how that opens and closes, sort of. I'm going to move the camera here in a bit, but basically, when the RPMs go up, this opens and it raises the port height for the exhaust port. So all we got to do is we got to take all this apart, get this out of there so we can really get this super duper cleaned up. We need to get that screw out, which has already been boogered up by somebody else. That's unfortunate, but I think we can still get it. There we go. These power valve fasteners are almost always super tight and really hard to get loose. So I like to get the blue wrench out. A little heat in there. Usually that helps, but well, let's see. That's not being cooperative. It's okay. We got a little short, stubby guy. He's usually nice and stiff and doesn't flex much, so it usually works better. There we go. Out of there. Now we ought to be able to slide this out. Yeah, there we go. Just like that. Keep track of how all this goes if you don't know, so you get it back in right. These ones are pretty easy actually. Heat her up again a little bit. That's enough. There we go. They go in phases. Yeah, but they go in phases. It's not always, you know, it's not always like that. I mean, right now they're freaking stoked on it, but it's not always that way. So, sounds great, Steve. Have a good one. Bye. All right, so now we got her all out of there. Now we got to do some deep cleaning, get that all cleaned up and make it look shiny. Get these all cleaned up. The good thing is they're super oily, but they're not crusty. They don't have a lot of buildup on them, so they should actually come clean pretty easy. Highland Cycles, this Morgan. I don't have one. I can order one, but I definitely don't have one here. And you know, the better petcock to put on those is actually a Yamaha one. I can't remember. All right, guys, got the cylinder all cleaned up. Base gasket surface nice and clean. Head gasket surface nice and clean. Power valve area nice and clean. Got to actually get a little bit more of that gasket off of there. When you're doing this, you want to make sure you get everything super clean, because any like grit or anything that gets that in there probably won't cause the motor to like blow up, but it could cause it to wear prematurely, and then you have to do this all over again, or next time plate the cylinder. So make sure you get all that stuff out of there. Looks really good. Got our power valves all cleaned up. So hear that, how it's kind of gritty? You need to clean that a little bit better. And that happens when you run things through the sandblaster. Sometimes even though I did blow these out with air, you don't get quite all the stuff out of there. So want to make sure, get that all moving nice, blow it out. There we go. That's what you want to see. All right, so we got the cylinder all ready to rock and roll. Let's put the power valves in. So if you guys are doing this, there is a left and a right to these things. So you can see there's a bigger cutout there than there. Those big cutouts go down. Also, this little bar needs to be level across, like, you know, perpendicular to the bore. And if you put it in wrong, it ends up pointing differently. So I like to take these, a little bit of assembly lube, and get it all over all the parts. Partially too because this is going to sit for a while before we get all the parts for the motor. So get that in there, line up the bolt holes, take some red Loctite, and guys, I've mentioned this before, but it always bears mentioning again. When you're putting thread locker on anything, both surfaces, the bolt and the hole it's going into, need to be completely oil free and dry, which these are. Otherwise the thread locker doesn't do anything. Then I have to come in here, make sure they move nice and easy, and they do. Then before we put this in here, there's a little seal right in there. I don't know if you guys see if you can see that. Yeah, there we go. So that seal is right there. That is what keeps the spooge from going, like keeps tranny oil from going in, also keeps spooge from coming out and fouling everything up. So you want to make sure you replace that. It's in the gasket kit, so I'm going to pop that thing out, put a new one in. There's our new one. These things just kind of push in with your thumb. They're just not very tight. There we go. Shiny new one. Then with this, I like to put a little bit of grease on it so it's easy to slide through things. And when you're doing this, you got to kind of plan this out, because everything needs to be in order as it goes on. So first thing on is going to be a spacer. There we go. So spacer's on. Then we have the little actuator guy, and this one's kind of a pain because these springs are hard to get over these little dowels, so you gotta just take your time and get them over the dowels first. There we go. Now ease the shaft through, and I don't know if this is showing up all that well in the video, but just take your time, get it through there. Keep those springs, see, like that, it's kind of wanting to come apart. There we go. So now we got one more spacer. Now got to get the hole lined up. There's a hole in this shaft that goes in, and the hole in the actuator. There we go. Take our last little Allen. A little bit of thread locker on that action. And you definitely want to be super careful with putting that in. I started it with the ratchet on there, but you can see I'm actually doing it by hand here because you do not want to strip those threads, and it's pretty easy to do. It's such a tiny little bolt and tiny little hole. It's pretty easy to strip those threads. So I'm gonna be careful there. Go easy on tightening it. There we go. You can test the whole thing. Make sure it's moving nice and smooth. It is. That looks good. Now, take our retainer. Slide it up under there like that. And let's see if I can find another one of these screws, because that one's all boogered up. Let's see if I can find another one. All right, so I found one, but it's a little bit long, so I'm gonna cut it down and make sure it's the right length, because I think it'll bottom out. But I might actually try it real fast and see if it bottoms out. If it doesn't, then we'll just use that one. If it does, then I'll have to cut it. Aha! Actually, that worked great. So pull it back out, put some Loctite on that. And I like to use an impact on these to tighten them down, because you don't want this thing coming loose, and doing it all with your hands, you can't get it all that tight and you might strip it anyway. So there we go. Just little tappertons, and still working good. Get our gasket through there, and we'll be done. Alright, here's the impact on these guys to tighten them down. Make sure it moves, it does. And if you can grab it with your fingers on that tiny little shaft and turn it, you know it's moving just fine. So let me explain a little bit about what the power valve does on a two-stroke. Most of you guys probably know, but for those of you who don't, so there we go. So if you're looking there right now, the power valve is closed. Those two little flappers straight out in the front of the cylinder, those are the power valves, and they're closed right now. So that's at low RPM. And what that does is it effectively lowers the port height of the exhaust port. So as the piston comes up, it starts to compress the mixture earlier, which gives it more compression and more low end. Then, as the RPMs go up, they move up out of the way. See that? They move out of the way and let the piston move freer and faster, because it's compressing later, and that lets the bike breathe up higher in the RPM and make more power in the top. And what that does is it broadens the power band, right? It doesn't give the bike any more horsepower. It just opens up that power band, so where it makes power is a bigger, wider range of RPM. And that was a huge difference in two strokes from back in the old days to now. It's really what made them way easier to deal with. Back in the 80s and earlier, you'd hear people talk about being on the pipe, and that meant that because the pipe was the thing, the shape of the pipe was the thing that determined when it made power, and so it was this really narrow power band. If you guys want to know more, there's actually an awesome book that I highly recommend called Stealing Speed by Matt Oxley, I think is his name. Anyway, it's super rad. It's really hard to find in actual paper version. The paperback versions are like $100 and something. The hardback versions are even more because they don't print them anymore. But you can actually get it on Kindle for super cheap, like $9 or $10, and it's really, really great. It talks a lot about the two-stroke technology, how it progressed back in from the 40s up through basically today. Anyway, it's really awesome. So I highly recommend that. No, this isn't sponsored by that guy or his book or anything. It's just a really cool book about two-strokes. So yeah, there we go. Cylinder's ready to go. Gonna end this video here, guys. Thanks for joining me. Make sure, like I said, if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel, because we're going to be going through building this 144, every last little piece of it. Hope you enjoyed this short little video, and I hope you get out and you ride your dirt bikes!
Okay.